On the morning of December 30th, 2018, a police officer from the Vestosta police station stood guard outside a crime scene in the Presidente Parrot neighborhood of San Fernando, Argentina. What he didn't know was that someone else was still in the victim's house. While waiting for the forensics team, he heard a woman scream from inside, which was strange because the only person in there was already dead. When he went to check, nothing had changed. The body was right where he'd left it. Then the scream came again, and this time he traced it to a green parrot in a cage by the wall, shrieking the same words at full volume. "Oh, please let me go. Oh no." And at first, no one took it seriously. It was too strange to be a clue, and too senseless to mean anything. The reason the officer was there in the first place was around 6 a.m.
A man named Miguel Santorino Roland called 911. Roland, who went by Mambo, told officers he'd come home from his overnight shift at the V's rugby club, about 100 meters away, and found a woman dead in her room. When officers arrived at the house, they found the wooden loft in complete disarray. There were mattresses on the floor, items scattered around the room, and in the middle of it was the body of a woman lying face up, without clothes and with bruises across her face and body, suggesting brutal physical violence. As officers walked through the scene, Roland wrapped both hands around his own throat and suggested that she had probably been strung-light. This was strange considering the forensic team hadn't arrived yet, and nobody in that house should have known how she died. The woman was 46-year-old Elizabeth Alejandra Toledo, known to the people around her as Ellie. She had a moderate intellectual disability and rented the wooden loft at the top of house 27 at the corner of Bodu and Geridetti streets in the Presidente Parrot neighborhood. The parrot in the cage was hers. Ellie had raised it in her care and called it Patchouli. Over time, the two of them had grown close enough that the bird had learned the sounds and phrases of her daily life. Apart from her pet, she shared the house with 3 men. Roland was described as her partner. The second man was 64-year-old George Alvarez, known as T.O. George. The third had been kicked out by the landlord 2 weeks earlier, specifically because the landlord had caught him physically abusing Ellie. According to people in her life, the abuse had been going on for some time. None of it had ever been reported. Within days, Prosecutor Bibana Santella from the Gender Violence Unit of San Fernando had all 3 men brought in for questioning. The third was cleared almost immediately when the landlord confirmed he'd been expelled from the property roughly 15 days before the murder, which gave him a verified alibi. That left Roland and Alvarez, who were arrested in January 2019 and held in pre-trial detention, neither of whom agreed to testify. In the meantime, the autopsy was performed by Dr. Federico Curasoni, and it confirms that Ellie had been sexually assaulted during the attack, hid multiple times, and then manually strangled, which eventually took her life. As a result, after nearly 3 years of pre-trial detention, Roland walked out a free man. But during the trial, the prosecution also brought forward evidence that went beyond the question of who killed Ellie Ann, spoke to what her life had been like before the night she died. One of those details came from the police officer who had been stationed at the loft on December 30th. He told the court about the scream he heard coming from inside the room and the words he eventually traced back to Pauli's cage. "Oh, please, let me go. Oh no." These words were formally entered into the case file as evidence. And they were not the only words Pauli had learned. A neighbor who ran a small shop down the street and used to sell Ellie birdseed for the parrot also appeared in the case file and said she had once heard the parrot repeat a different phrase, "Why did you hit me?" And she remembered exactly when she heard it. It was right around the time the third man had been kicked out of the house for hitting Ellie. Once you give this detail enough attention, it changes how you see everything else, in this case. Because for a parrot to commit a particular sentence to memory, it usually needs to hear that phrase repeated many times for the sound to register. "Please let me go," or "Why did you hit me?" isn't something a parrot learns from a single night. So, for Potty to say those words, Elizabeth would have had to say them over and over across multiple weeks in the same desperate tone every time. This means what the officer heard that morning wasn't a recording of her final moments. It was a recording of her everyday life.
A parrot can repeat up to 150 words depending on the species, but specifically you have to repeat many times for a parrot to say something like that. "No, please, let me go." It's quite complex, what the parrot learned. Imagine what this woman must have suffered before these two men ended up murdering her.
As for Alvarez, the evidence against him was much more direct. During the autopsy, the organic remains collected from the victim's body matched his genetic profile. On top of that, an eyewitness also placed him entering and leaving the house around the time of the attack. To make it even more disturbing, roughly 10 days after the murder, an acquaintance walked into the prosecutor's office and reported that Alvarez had confessed to him that he had gone to the house, had sexual intercourse with Elizabeth, and only afterward realized she had already passed. But the forensic evidence proved otherwise, and confirmed that the injuries were consistent with sexual assault inflicted while Ellie was still alive. The court convicted him of aggravated sexual assault and femicide, and sentenced him to life in prison. As for Patchouli, he was taken in by one of Ellie's sisters after the trial. It's not been reported whether it ever repeated those words again, but for however long it lived, it carried the only recording that existed of what Ellie's life sounded like inside that loft.